morning, Ms. Lewis. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for all of the work that you've done this year in this process and with your students. I've been in your room a number of times and see it's very clear that your students are your priority. So I appreciate your work there. You sent me all of your SLO documentation ahead of time, and I appreciate that because, again, it gives me an opportunity to look through the data, sort through, and be prepared for our meeting.
Okay, well, thank you, and you're welcome. This has been a process. There have been some hard times, but in the end, I learned a lot about my students by reviewing their data and also about my instruction. So overall, it has been a beneficial process.
Good, good. So now I know this is your planning period, and this conference should take 20, no more than 30 minutes, okay? And the purpose of our conference today is to review your scores and then to talk about the impact that your instruction has had on your students and their growth, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. As you've analyzed your data, what did you notice?
So I know last time we talked about my 10 students, and I stated that there were 4 students that I was concerned about, one in particular. Well, I'm happy to say that out of those 4 that we initially talked about, 2 of them met their targets and the other 2 didn't. The one that I was most concerned about, he met his target.
Good, good. That's wonderful. I know that during the mid-course conference you focused on some targeted interventions with your students. What strategies did you implement and how do they impact your students' abilities to make their growth targets?
Okay, well, I met with the reading interventionist as we discussed. She watched my class while I observed Jane in her classroom implementing small groups. Then we planned how I could implement that within my class. So as a result of me implementing small groups, I was able to have more one-on-one grouping with students and small group instruction, which my students needed, as we discussed, because me standing in front of the classroom just wasn't beneficial for the students' learning and their growth. Additionally, I was able to provide the same level of differentiation for all of my students. So not just those 4 that I was concerned about, but everyone got more one-on-one and small group time with me.
Good, good. Were they able to meet their targets?
Yes, one of the 3 students did meet their targets and 2 didn't. However, they all grew, which is wonderful. I differentiated, so I don't know why they didn't make the targets because I did implement the strategies we talked about, so that was a concern for me. I don't know.
Well, setting growth targets is new for us, and it's a new process, and it's something that's going to take some time for us to really develop an accuracy. What I want you to think about, though, is as we move forward, we're going to be collecting data on students, and we'll have a good bit of available data on our students, and we'll have an idea of what their typical performance looks like. All of that will help us create and set accurate growth targets for students.
Okay.
So were there any other surprises in your data?
So I had one student who had initial strong scores initially, but I did notice that his fluency started to slow down. He had a lot of absences this year due to illness and other family issues. However, not enough that I would have removed him from the SLO. When I think about it, I really should have given him more one-on-one instruction to build upon those skills that he was missing instead of solely relying on him completing the work when he was at home with his family.
Great. So you've talked a lot about your lower performing students, particularly the one who didn't meet his growth target. How did your higher performing students fare?
Well, they all met their targets, and I believe that me incorporating more primary sources, above level grade texts, the vocabulary strategies and differentiation helped them grow. So they all met, so that's a good thing.
Good, good. So as you reflect on this year, what are some of the interventions that you implemented that really helped your students to grow?
Okay, during our mid-course conference, we discussed you coming in and talking with our team about analyzing data. One of the first things that was beneficial was when you did that with our team, and so that assisted. We started to meet more regularly as a team to discuss data. I also incorporated, again, those varied text levels for students, the vocabulary strategies, support from the reading interventionists, again, the flexible grouping. And then in my professional growth and development portion of the SLO, I talked about reading the book, Leading and Managing a Differentiated Classroom. I found some strategies in there that I liked, and so I attempted to implement some strategies. And I also searched online for some additional information to help my students grow. So I have a lot of information, and admittedly, I became overwhelmed.
Oh, I can understand so. one of your strengths is that you are willing to go to any length to make sure that your students are growing and learning. However, I do recognize you saying that it's overwhelming. Okay. So what I want you to really do, and I want to encourage you is to think about that one strategy that you used and how that impacted your students' growth. Okay, and how did that impact learning in your class? And then what we can do moving forward is look at one, maybe two strategies to implement, and let's track students' progress as a result of those strategies and see where that takes us. Okay, that way we'll have a variety of effective strategies that we can use in your classroom.
All right.
Okay, but we want to focus on one or two so that you don't become overwhelmed.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I know during this process when we first started, you were concerned about the assessments. Okay, and not having the appropriate assessments. How well did your assessments measure your student growth? And then thinking about that assessment, what adjustments would you make to it, if any?
Okay. We still need help with this. We've been using our standardized assessments and some additional formative assessments, but we really need some assessments that accurately measure what we're teaching. What are other schools using? Does the district have a plan to assist with assessments?
Well, assessments are a need for everyone across the board, and it's an area of development. So what we're thinking about doing is using some school time and to do some school and district level professional development in that area to support our teachers. I can certainly ask around and find out what other schools are using, and maybe they'll even let us borrow some of the assessments that they have. During our conversation, however, you did highlight that there were some areas of success in your plan and then some areas that you'd like to refine. Thinking about that, how will you use this information to plan for next year?
This year, I've seen the benefit of purposeful grouping and providing more structured one-on-one and group time with my students. So I'm going to be sure next year to spend more time really practicing the procedures for grouping with my students so that I can implement that at the beginning of the year. I think I'll see greater gains with all of my students if I do that. Also, I mentioned you modeling for our team. The analysis of data was really beneficial, and we've been meeting since then, but our meetings are sporadic. So we're talking about really setting up weekly meetings where we're discussing data and then using that data to drive that instruction instead of solely relying on the pacing guide to move on with our instruction.
So what I hear you saying is that you're going to take more of a focus at looking at student data and their outcomes on the work that you have during the classroom, and use that to help you make instructional decisions versus trudging along on the pacing guide.
Exactly.
Okay, good. Because research shows that when you use formative assessment data to help make those instructional decisions, students master content at a much deeper level.
And I certainly agree, because I've seen that this year when I've really been taking a hard look at my students' data.
Good, good. So as you know, in addition to self-scoring your SLO, we're going to use the agreed upon rubric to determine what your score is going to be, or the level of proficiency. And based on the data that you've provided, your SLO meets the proficient range. Okay, so good job there. And this aligns with the self-score that you provided earlier. And this was no surprise to you because you've been measuring your students' progress throughout the entire year. So do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. Us meeting throughout the year assisted. I progress monitored the entire time, tracked student data, and I had the scoring rubric. So I knew the score before coming in here, so no surprises.
Very good. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for your hard work in this process and trusting the process. Thank you for the hard work you've done with your students.
And thank you for meeting with me and for all of your assistance throughout this process.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks.